Let's go back to NBC News analyst Christopher Dickey. He's also the world news editor for the Daily Beast and someone we turn to, unfortunately, far too often these days, Chris. And as you're there in Brussels, and I know you spent a great deal of time there, what's the sense on the street now? How are people responding to what's unfolding these last hours?
Well, I'd say it's very somber. I think there's a lot of confusion in the city because a lot of traffic has been rerouted. You have central parts of the city that are just cordoned off now. I think there was a lot of worry earlier today that there would be yet another attack. The problem, one of the sinister parts of a plot like this, is that you just don't know when it's over. You can't be sure. For instance, in Paris, we know that the people who carried out the horrible attacks on November 13th were looking to carry out yet another horrible attack 2 or 3 days later. Fortunately, they were stopped. So all of that, I think, makes for a pretty grim mood in this city.
Christopher, you hear a couple of schools of thought these days, especially when you talk about what's going on in Brussels. And some people say the intelligence agencies there are not up to snuff, that they are not doing enough to root out some of the people who are then exporting terrorism to other parts of Europe. And then you hear others say, well, the problem they have to deal with is far greater than, for example, what intelligence agencies in this country have to deal with. And in large part, that's due to the number of people, the sheer number of people, Europeans, who've traveled to places like Iraq and Syria and then come back to Europe to perhaps spread violence. What's your take on this?
Well, Matt, I'd say both things are true. I mean, clearly the extent of the problem here in Europe is very, very extensive because there is a very large population of Muslim and Arab people and also Turks who have a lot of young men in their ranks who are very disaffected and unemployed and easy targets for the recruiters who come and say and preach jihad and say, you're just a bum right now, we're going to turn you into a hero fighting for God. And there are going to be a handful of people who will listen to that. Remember, we don't need to talk about thousands and thousands of terrorists to carry out something like this. We only need to see them recruit a few hundred, and that they've been able to do here.
And Chris, what about the response? I remember after the Paris attacks, the French President Hollande was very vocal about a muscular military response and deeper involvement in Syria and fighting ISIS in Syria and Iraq. What do you think might be the fallout here?
Well, I think there is going to be a push for even more action against ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, and the net result of that is going to be to heighten the pressure on ISIS to carry out attacks in Europe and in the United States. So I think we're in for a very difficult time ahead. We can be winning the war on the ground in Syria and Iraq, and to some extent we are, and then we can be losing it by basically suffering terrible terrorist attacks in Europe and in the United States.
And Chris, last time we talked, you and I spoke about the extraordinary changes taking place in Europe, the face of Europe changing. How does an attack like this impact those changes or accelerate those changes?
Well, it certainly is going to make it more and more difficult for Muslims and Arabs to integrate into European society. The levels of suspicion is very high, and that translates into xenophobic politics, the kind of thing we see with Geert Wilders in the Netherlands or Marine Le Pen in France, or the really fascist Nazi parties in Germany, not in Germany, but in Greece. So I think all of that translates into a situation of more and more of a cultural divide, harder and harder to integrate people, and then that, of course, will be used for more recruiting by the jihadists.
Christopher Dickey. Christopher, thank you very much. We will be talking a lot in the coming days. We appreciate it.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.